Welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. It is a privilege to have Jason Sprenkle here with us today, CEO over at Key Data Dashboard. Going to go into detail about not just Key Data, but other ventures he has had, what he's learned. Jason, great name. Pleasure to have you on the show here today.
Yeah, great to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Excellent. And I've had a lot of fun learning about your background, learning more about key data and what you guys do and the needs for it in today's market. But thought we'd start with your background, your story, everything you've done to get to this point here in 2022.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it. A lawyer by trade. Kind of grew up out of school as a software lawyer in the Carolinas, defending software companies and pharmaceutical companies. Took a lot of lessons out of that, particularly for the software side, things to do and not to do tend to be something that went wrong by the time you end up in litigation. Parlay that into an opportunity to come down to Northwest Florida and do real estate development. So did that for 8 years. And then when the market turned and no longer became a great idea to build condos for anybody, took off on kind of what evolved into a series of entrepreneurial startups, all surrounding the vacation rental space, which has kind of been the bread and butter of my background for the last 20 years. Had 9 different companies, if you include a charity that we currently run. Raised money 6 times, but only 1 time from private equity. The rest were friends and family. Have had 6 good exits, 1 that's still ongoing with Key Data, and 2 that I would just call failures if we're being honest with each other. But lots of lessons learned along the way.
I like those stats and going along that path with you from litigation onto real estate development. Want to talk more about vacation rentals, but just getting a sense of the background. 9 startups, raised money for 6 of them, had 6 exits in there. Curious on the correlation of those 2, by the way, and appreciate you mentioned the other 2 failures. What I hear from that is learnings, really getting an understanding of what went that direction, almost like you said with litigation and mistakes beforehand that get you there. But what made that shift? And speaking to Key Data in that, what made that shift to have you focus on vacation rentals?
Yeah, really just an opportunity to try to scratch our own itch. I'm a big believer in all of the businesses that have really been good for me have started with trying to solve a problem that I had with something I was doing, right? One of my other businesses had a need, looked for an opportunity to do it better than what I was finding out in the marketplace. So for me, we had just finished up 3 real estate development projects. This was back when everybody was building condos and we were all making money by the grace of God and timing. And then the market shifted in the early 2000s. And we had a couple of real estate holdings that we kept out of our own developments, 6 or 7 properties, and started listing them with different professional vacation rental companies as a service. Depending upon the location, we hired the expert in the area. And really just, we weren't blown away with the services we were getting. It seemed like the space really wasn't addressing the needs of homeowners. And so we took a shot to try to go in and do it better, just service our own needs from the start and the neighbors around us, and leaned into it when we felt a little bit of momentum and grew that into a business for 15 years that we sold about 1.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that took us into kind of holistically an operator in the vacation rental space, right? We were on the ground building just what is a traditional property management company up in Northwest Florida. Went from 0 properties up to about 740 by the time that we sold it, principally higher end properties, and built 2 software companies off of that same theory. We had a need for a vacation rental company that wasn't being met by the current software offerings. It seemed like there was an opportunity to go build tools better than what were available to us. And so we went out and found great technology partners and built tools principally to start with for ourselves, but then parlay those into full businesses by making sure that what we were developing for ourselves was going to be something that could service the broader industry.
So early 2000s, we're talking pre Airbnb, mainly in the short-term rental side, other platforms that specialize in, long-term rentals and the marketplace of rentee, renter. You've seen a lot of evolution in this period of time, and your tools are designed to work, on top of some of these other platforms.
Yep.
But how have you seen tech come into play here? What has that allowed for? And really, how has demand shifted things? Because I know years back, even speaking on the personal side, on the short terms, looking at hotels these days, more and more looking for platforms, and then for let's call it homeowners being able to rent for long periods of time. Uh, like you said, there was subpar services, some of them being subpar. Now
Yeah.
there's different platforms allow for it, but it all comes down to the analytics. I'm a numbers guy. We're looking at digital analytics all the time. That's what I like about the benchmarking that you guys do and what that makes available. How have things shifted over the past 5, 10 years with these changes in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's been an incredible industry to watch. We spent, like I said, roughly 20 years in it. It was 17 years, 18 years of kind of steady growth, right? An industry that was growing up, but growing up principally from a mom and pop industry to one with some tools and a little bit more sophistication, but not really exploding or no exponential growth. And then we hit the last, call it 2 years. We saw Airbnb really shift the landscape, bring in a whole younger set of travelers, just a different philosophy around how we spend our time, right, with one another, and our willingness to live what is described as this nomadic lifestyle, right, to unchain ourselves from working for the man, being strapped to the same seat, and to go out and see the world a little bit, to value experiences and time with one another. And then COVID confounded that, right? It really cemented the explosion of the vacation rental space in a number of ways. First of all, as you alluded to, it really blew up the demand, right? It shut down our ability to go to hotels, to travel internationally, to jump on cruises for a short period of time, and so that put people, still with this heavy need to go spend time with their loved ones. In fact, an enhanced need, as we kind of saw COVID impacting us all. It brought us all closer to one another, and that demand for traveling and spending time with another, it put people in vacation rentals was the upshot. And so we saw this explosion in the marketplace for vacation rentals as a whole. And with that, for our particular business came the need for better data, right? You had all these businesses that have been in the space forever, and all of a sudden the demand shifting wildly. We're closed down for a month, 2 months, depending upon the market you were in, much longer. And then as soon as the markets opened back up, you saw this explosion in demand. And so we really had this roller coaster of a ride in the space. And so as the industry itself is going through just a giant upswing, there's also a demand to understand what's happening in real time. And so our company provides those kind of analytics to both people that are in the space and people who are looking to get in the space to try to better understand what's going on. So very fortunate turn of events for the vacation rental space as a whole, and for our company being a data provider around the space. But it's an industry that's still maturing at a very fast rate. Private equity is coming into the space in a big way. The hotel players are coming into the space and really realizing that it's unique. It's a different set of tech. It's a different set of audience and players. And then finally, to finish up the answer, you're really seeing the data come together in a meaningful way, kind of right before our eyes. I kind of picked the time frame of the last 6 months and maybe the next 2 years, to where you can bring real institutional money to play by combining the real estate opportunities with the vacation rental data. And so you're starting to see these REITs and the big banks and the underwriters all move into the space. So exciting time to be in the industry for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do a lot of skiing and snowboarding. I have friends at some of these resort towns that they'll put they'll put their properties up for vacation rentals during the holiday season, some peak weekends. And it's amazing to see, what percentage of their, annual mortgage gets covered from it. out here in the desert in Palm Springs, Mountain California. I have friends that do it during festival season. And it just seems like such a win-win for both sides of the marketplace. You get these great locations that offer a unique experience, as well as these revenue streams for property owners, homeowners. How large is the addressable market for you? How many homeowners are there renting out properties in the U.S.? Or I don't know if you could speak to number of
Sure.
users for the platform, but just how large have things become, as you said, over the past couple years?
Yeah, short answer is it's massive and it's accelerating quickly. The supply is growing. You've got give or take 10 million units round number that are
Mhm.
vacation rental units worldwide, roughly 2 million for easy numbers in the US, but the supply is growing very fast. The
Mm.
last 6 months in particular has seen a real explosion to try to meet that demand, right? You've got everything from what you would consider to be just the traditional second homeowner who makes some money off of renting their unit to what's now shifting to a very focused investment game, right? Anywhere you look online, you see people who are starting to make a living or at least a legitimate side hustle out of the Airbnbs, and that's shifting over, as I said, to kind of the institutional money and REITs starting to look at it. And the shift's happening because the data is allowing it to happen. It used to be, yeah, you wanted a place in Breckenridge or Hilton Head, and you thought I can make some money and satisfy our need of having a second home. That shifted over to people really making a business case out of it, right? Understanding the cap rates, the return on investments, and really understand that there's a potential for a much better cap rate or return than there are in some of the long-term rentals. And so it's opened up the door to a whole new group of investors, young and old and institutional, that are getting into the game. And the data is finally caught up to where we can make some really smart decisions around that.
So being able to look at that data, see the best time of year to rent out, daily rates, being able to make increases accordingly,
That's right.
uh, you know, overall occupancy. It's these type of metrics that really stand out and are the most impactful, the most meaningful to the actions for owners.
Yeah, that's a great point. Two things that have changed. One is our ability to maximize the opportunity once you have a property, right? So the ability to understand what rates play well in the market, how to optimize your pricing, takes benchmarking data, right? See what's working out there and to be able to adjust and to be able to adjust in real time as opposed to, you go back even 5 years, most rates were static. Now most rates are very dynamic, more like what you experience when you go to try to book something from an airline, right? The players have access to understand the demand, how it's shifting, the particular demand for their unit, type of unit and location. And so they're able to optimize their price at the right time. And then the second piece is knowing where to buy, right? Cap rates for certain types of homes in certain areas are vastly better than others, right? There's a lot of property that you'd love to use with your family that aren't necessarily great investments long term, right? Not compared to some other units that you say, look, I don't want to go stay in this place. I want this to generate revenue for me. And understanding where you can get those best returns is a key to the data.
Sure, sure. And it just seems like such a relevant topic for today. And anytime real estate's brought up, this now as an avenue, I feel like it's so much more approachable to buy
Yeah.
a property, list it for short-term rentals, almost regardless of the market at this point. I mean, I hear about it happening all across the US, and be able to use it as that type of investment vehicle. So getting all of the data here, how do you guys shape new products? How do you build on top of your stack to determine, hey, we can add even more value to our audience from here?
Yeah, so we took a unique approach. There's been a couple of companies in the space that have, for some time, roughly 10 years, scraped data off of what we call the OTAs in the space. We're talking about
Mhm.
Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com. So you can see the supply when you go out there, just like if you went to any of those sites and kind of look to see how many units were in the market, you get relatively good data around supply. The difference is you have a very hard time interpreting from looking at the calendars online which units are really booked with a guest stay, how much people are really paying, where, for example, guests are coming from. And so we took the long tail approach with our business and a very strategic, intentional approach of going in and and digging ditches, as I like to say, building a moat, however you want to look at it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but going and getting data direct from the source. So there were some examples in the hotel space of large companies who had gone and built relationships with thousands of hotels to get the data directly from them. And the upshot was you got not only real-time data, but you got, of course, accurate data. The vacation rental space was deeply fragmented from the tech down to the lodging providers themselves. But we had been embedded in the space for 16 years by the time we started this company. And we said, hey, we're in a unique position with our tech experience and our relationships to go actually pull this off, which is to go do integrated partnerships from a data perspective with now 60 plus reservation platforms, and then to go sell to these smaller mom and pop businesses that are maturing very quickly, one at a time worldwide, and to get this data flowing through these pipelines from all these different individuals. We knew if we could pull that off, that we could have a really unique data set that could add some value to the marketplace that wasn't there. So that's the journey we've been on, one customer at a time, one relationship at a time.
And even through other companies in vacation, real estate, as you mentioned, you were able to tap into your experience, some of the partnerships you guys had in play, package it into the product here so that it's available. Have you seen a lot of competition? Has it been difficult to navigate through those waters for your own growth?
Yes and no. For us initially, the one of the keys was just figuring out who we wanted to be when we grew up. Right, we knew
Sure.
we were starting the beginning of a long process. Right, we know going out and building all these tech integrations, and then going out and building one customer at a time from a data perspective was going to be a long journey. But we knew as we start to get critical mass in certain markets that we could start to provide real value, kind of one market at a time. So you go out and you get all the data for Hilton Head, and now you've got real good insights for Hilton Head. And so we've been building what started as a pretty domestic business, and now we're quickly scaling it international. So we're getting more and more insights in all these small markets around Europe, Australia, and starting to get into the Far East. And so it's been fun to watch it grow from a competitive standpoint. The only competition we've run into are with the legacy providers. We made the intentional decision from the beginning to go slower and to try to get it right and to be this disruptor in the long run. The other companies have pretty much taken more of a sales and marketing approach, go quick, go fast, get there first. Both, good strategic plays. But for ours, we thought that when it comes to data, that in the end, quality will prevail, and it's better to go slow and get it right. And have a better long-term product. And so that's the direction we've taken. And so our approach from the beginning has always been, come at it intentionally with data quality as our leader and marketing to point.
Absolutely. I find data is only as good as what you do with it. And if you're, applying it and it's off, it quickly gets phased out of the processes. So like you said, the quality, being able to have, enough in there. It's really exciting to hear about international. I feel like I could ask you 20 questions just on differentiators from the US and other markets and what you're seeing in terms of growth right now. But it seems like there's a lot more room for you guys to continue to expand.
Yeah, it's really the next journey for us. If you look at our to-do list, a lot of things under the heading of internationalization are at the top of it.
And imagine you're seeing some of the same trends in major markets across the globe right now in terms of the volume of vacation rentals that are entering the market, the volume of owners at that.
Yeah, for sure. Europe acts a little different than the US. It's lagged a little bit. Of course, it was slower coming out of the COVID, more lockdowns. A lot of this was legislative driven because of the health scares. But as it's opened back up, it's really kind of a lagging version of what happened in the US. As each market comes back online, you're seeing an explosion in the demand that's fueling an explosion in the supply, and really just creating a pretty nice environment for people involved in the space.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And real estate is in an investment class of its own, short-term real estate. Again, it's been very clear for how both sides of the marketplace can benefit at this point. It's only going to grow from here. Imagine it's in textbooks at the high school level at this point in terms of what short-term real estate can do for individuals and how to balance it in a portfolio. Speaking to key data, speaking to your past ventures, what are different learnings that you've had that can open up with to the audience? What could founders who are listening and test out for their own models, for their own path, their own journey? What are some different avenues that should be explored in terms of what to test to hit the next milestones?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a couple of big takeaways as I look back on what's worked and not's worked for me. One is this idea of staying true to your, your passion, right? To find something if you're going down the path of however you want to call it, scratch your own itch or solve your own problems, but to get up every morning and make sure that you're not trying to build cool software, not trying to build a business, that you're trying to solve a problem at the core, right? And so, part of our ethos is continuously going back to our customer base, right? Starting with ourselves out of the gate and asking ourselves, are we solving a problem for somebody? Are we building a tool that's going to make their day-to-day operations better, going to make their life easier, or more efficient, and more profitable, and trying to separate that from the desire that we're consistently lured towards as business people, right? Which is just, hey, how can I make more money? How can I sell something else, right? Like that's a different philosophical approach to how can I solve a problem for somebody else. So it's something that we continue to remind ourselves, weekly, of going back to the core of why we're here. And I think if you stay true to that, that's always worked out well for me. Also, just being a kind of a data-driven company, even as a company that now sells data and dashboards to other companies, you'll catch yourself constantly needing to remind yourself to go back to it, right? To make those efficient data-driven decisions. We got 2 years into this company, and I looked up and we were teaching companies how to be data-driven, and we weren't data-driven enough ourselves. And so it's one of those journeys that you're constantly working on, right? Returning to the customer's needs and returning to, hey, are we making smart, efficient decisions from within our own company? We've always had the approach that I think has paid dividends from all of our businesses to be a people-driven first. It kind of sounds a little trite sometimes, but there's companies that talk about it, and there's companies that really lean into it. My brother was a partner of mine in one of our first businesses, and he came from the restaurant side of the house. And he said, look, I genuinely believe that if you spend most of your energy as a leader investing in your people and giving them the tools that they want and making sure that you treat them, as a whole person, meaning you realize the challenges they have inside and outside of work and with their families, and you have empathy and humility with respect to them, that they will take care of your customers, that they'll get up and work harder for you, and that will take care of the profits. And so in every venture we've done, the good ones and the bad, we've tried to have that be the cornerstone of our leadership approach, which is to make sure that your employees are treated the way you'd want to be treated and have the tools that you need. And, the old adage of get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seats and get out of their way has worked very well for us. So those are some of the bigger ones.
I use that quote of treat people the way you want to be treated, and think it applies to everything that you're saying here, from surveying the customer and in an ongoing basis, in the sense that things are going well. Don't focus on market share, as you said, the money, things like that, as much as how can you solve the problem better,
Yeah.
and being able to use that as the access to growth, being able to have the focus there has you doing it for the right reasons, not just expanding to expand, but expanding to solve the problem, even for your current users. But as you said, with international expansion, for these next periods, maybe they're looking international prospects. You could continue to solve that problem. Maybe you're pulling data in, but I really like that approach, almost taking a step back and saying, hey, how do we solve the problem better versus just, hey, how do we make more? And the ability to be data driven in that. And I would say it's remarkable how many companies are data driven, sell data, but are not data driven in their own practices at times. I'll ask numbers about this. I see it in their advertising, things that are reported on dashboards in a very clear way. But those numbers are not present for different decisions that need to be made. So I like how you pointed that out. And even from your own learning, hey, we're selling data, realize we're not really looking at the data for how we're shaping our next decisions. And I see it done off assumption all the time. And then investing in people and being
Well, there's an
people driven. Yeah.
interplay between those you see on the SaaS side, right? Like most of the SaaS articles you read, there's so many companies that are so focused on engineering the right SaaS company, right? Getting the ARR and the churn and those metrics, if they're all executed, perfectly, they're there for a reason, right? They tell you if your company is performing well, and it's hard to fake them, but you can spend more time, I think, engineering your numbers and less time focused on your customers and get backwards for a minute, right? If you,
Mm-hmm.
I think in the end, you got to have the end in mind. You got to have the numbers there to measure it. But if you're spending most of your energy solving the customer's problems, I think the numbers are more likely to work out than if you're doing it in reverse, right? It's hard to build a business off of numbers. And then one more that's acute to kind of the conversation and what you guys do on a daily basis that I learned late was marketing, right? We had a vacation rental company that we were building. We were kind of midway through the journey. And I brought on a COO who was brilliant and helped us run the business and ultimately ran it for the last half of the company, a little longer than that, 8 or 9 years. And she started adding to the marketing team out of the gate. And I had 1 or 2 people on the marketing team, just enough to where we looked good. We had a good website. We had some good marketing outgoing. But the marketing team started getting bigger and bigger. And I thought, what are we doing? And then I looked up, a couple of months later, and all of a sudden we looked like we were a vastly better company than what we were. We were growing into it, but we found ourselves almost living up to our marketing. Our brand looked amazing. We were doing lifestyle photo shoots and putting out on your business.
And what do you do when you see slowdowns, when it's not working? How do you optimize? I mean, I imagine a lot of the information comes from this data-driven, people-driven approach. But how do you look at a period of plateau? Let's say it's not even going down, and optimize what you're doing to be able to continue to have that upward trajectory.
For me, it's returning to the basics, right? And making sure you're focused on the fundamentals. Okay. As I said, we've had an incredible year. The financials look right, metrics look right, the customers seem pretty happy. But if you look back in the kitchen, like the euphemism I used was there was spaghetti sauce all over the clean it, start to refocus on processes. And so I think when you have these down periods, it's a great time to get back in the kitchen, so to speak, and to make sure you're ready for the next rush, right? That you got the right recipes, not to beat up the analogy too far, but you're returning to, hey, what's working with our customers? Why are they joining us? Why are they leaving us? Go back and ask the hard questions that got you into the business in the first place, that made you passionate about it, right? Talk to some of your customers. And some of the businesses I admire most are the ones where they've got everybody in the company that kind of has a pulse on the front line, or the CEOs answering the phones. It's the people who are really paying attention to what's happening on the ground. And so often in these businesses, you'll catch yourself, and I think it's inevitable, you just caught up in the business of business, right? You're looking at the financials and you're having your meetings, and you're not stopping the conveyor belt enough to sit down and say, like, okay, what are we spending our time doing? And is it working? Is it not working? And so I hadn't done it in a year or so. And I got challenged by a consultant a few weeks ago. They said, are you all your team members really dialed into your strategic objectives for the second half of the year? And I said, I think so. And she said, well, do you feel like you've conveyed them clearly? I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I have. And she said, can you tell me what they are? And I said, well, that's a good question. Let me write them down for you. And just that exercise of going back to the basics of writing down the core objectives and getting alignment from the teams was super powerful for us, surprisingly so. And so I think when times are slow, to answer your question, it's go back to the fundamentals that got you in the business in the first place and take time to dial in those processes.
Go back to those fundamentals. Yeah, this is a question we have to ask ourselves all the time on the marketing side. Front lines of performance, things have slowed down. Going back to fundamentals would really serve there. Taking that pulse internally, externally, figuring out where you were getting the responses to begin with, what the product is really doing, what
Yeah.
problem it's solving, as you're mentioning, to begin with, and how to have that articulated, how to have that changed up. We've taken similar types of actions for campaigns and seen that type of lift. I've seen founders take similar types of mindsets and exercises. And as you mentioned, we got real clear about our goals, really made sure we communicated those, saw it repeated, saw it recreated from the team afterwards, and it made the difference. But all going back to fundamentals. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And prioritizing, right? I think it's hard to do. I've got ADD. I love chasing shiny objects, particularly ones that you think are going to bring in revenue. It's
Yeah.
easy as a founder, to deeply desire that new revenue and to go chase it. And if you're not careful, you wake up and you got your hands in too many things. And so I think one of the hardest things to do is, as a founder CEO, is to know when something's either not working or when it's just not the highest and best use of your time. Particularly when you're small and you're getting out of the gate, you want to do everything at once and you want to get that momentum and speed. But being able to decide, I call them the needle movers, but what's the most important thing that our team can be doing today and tomorrow, and limiting yourself to those core things and making sure that's what your team is focused on. Super important. Too many of us, I think, are chasing too many things at any given time and not put enough energy into the one or two that matter the most.
Sure. Looking to solve the problem, the slowdown with some new ideas, when going back to what actually moved the needle, seeing what emerges from those discussions could be where the answer lies. Not just chasing the next flashy object, which I'm certainly guilty of. Founders that we partner with, I could see agreeing or repeating with what you're saying. What about scale? It's what everyone's playing for. You get the processes optimized, everything's flowing. How do you take it to the next level in your experience with your past ventures? Again, you've had 6 exits, with key data. What different insights can you share towards scaling?
For me, for a couple of companies, the biggest lift for me has come when I get out of my own team's way, if that makes sense. You start out at any company, you're very people driven, right? You're personality driven. You got 3 or 4 people that are kind of carrying the weight. You're running backs on the team. If you're a founder and CEO, you're very passionate about what you started, and you're on the front lines, and you're reluctant to kind of let go and to delegate. I certainly struggle with that. Finding those people that you trust, making the hard decision that some of the people that might have started with you and grown up with you aren't necessarily experienced enough to kind of carry it to the next stage, and getting some new leadership in there. It's always a tricky spot, but when you do, you're always thankful for it. But we've scaled the best in past with my companies when I've gotten out of the way and I've found people around me that I've trusted enough to go out and improve themselves and run and scale. And so whether that's been software sales or rental sales or some of the development work, is finding the right people, making sure that they have the tools that they need, and then giving them enough room to excel and shine. You can do a whole lot more when you got a group of people rowing with you and trying to accomplish it. And sometimes they fail and they don't do it the way you wanted to do. And so keeping your eye on it and keeping close to it. But you can't get nearly enough done to scale on your own. And so it's not a magic bullet in terms of like, how do you get from 5 million to 10 million ARR, or some of those articles you can find out there. But I do think it's one of the unlocks for founders is finding a team of core leaders that you trust enough to let them run. You can run a whole lot faster together.
Can't do it on your own. Get that team around you. As mentioned, the optimization process, get them aligned on the goals, and then get out of their way.
That's right.
have the right parameters, the right tool sets, but it's all about the people driven, as you mentioned. I definitely see that true in many of the success stories that we've been a part of or seen firsthand. So I think that's excellent advice.
Hey, two more lessons that I wish I would have known earlier that might add value to somebody out there. One is I never really understood the wisdom that comes with the bird's eye view that some of the folks in VC and private equity have. Most of us out there in the founder world are scrappy and have been in the ditch, so to speak, their entire life. I had the benefit of getting a great private equity group on board with us in this company and finding a mentor who was younger than me several years back who came from the VC space, and just having some of the advice on, what business patterns look like could have saved me, for sure. It could have saved me obvious mistakes on the two ventures that I failed on. Really simple stuff like margins that I just hadn't gone down that path before. And I started to have lunch with the young guy who was out of the VC space, and just the clarity he had on, like, oh, typically when you see this, I find X, Y, and Z, gave me a lot of wisdom, and I've continued to benefit from that on my current board member. So if you don't have somebody and you're a founder of a small business or a medium business who's giving you great advice and you haven't fundraised, still find a mentor out there on the VC or private equity world in mind. They won't have the same set of knowledge you have as an operator, but they'll have a whole different viewpoint because they sit in a different seat that I think will benefit you deeply. And so I'd reach out and see if you can't find that. Second one is just a really small lesson I learned, but that I put fire quickly and with humility. I used to, I'm a people pleaser by nature, and I used to spend time letting people go very slowly, because of the empathy and never wanting to cut somebody short. But I realized from one of my business mentors that if people aren't in the right spot on the bus, they also want to get to the spot that's right for them. And so having the courage to tell them what they need to hear and having the courage to help them find the right spot that they're going to thrive is just as important for them as it is for you. But when you're actually going through the task, I probably had the unfortunate task of letting 30 or 40 people go over the last few years. Starting out with the direct message of we're letting you go and here's why is a whole lot better than being 20 minutes into it and them asking you, are you letting me go? It makes for a much quicker, less painful and better experience for both of you. So small task, but it's been super helpful to me. Not a lot of people talk about the firing process, and it was painful at the beginning.
Sure. It's a lesson I had to learn the hard way. I think a lot of founders as well too. And you think you can manage someone to get to a good point, but as you mentioned, they're probably thinking they may have the wrong seat in the bus. It's probably better for everyone, and it's much better to be intentional about it versus reactive when something does occur at a later point. Especially talking about how instrumental team is, individuals, people driven processes are towards growth. So, a tough topic, but as you mentioned, having the right team, it's imperative to hit these goals. And then I really liked the mentor side of things. And from a VC, I've heard VCs that in some conversations get a bad rep in the founder community. I don't think so at all. I think they're some of the smartest professionals I get to speak with, many with their own founder experience, things that have worked, things that have not. They've invested into high risk, high profile, high return type vehicles, seen a lot of it fail, been able to speak to why, some have better success records. But the ability to pick their brain versus just ask and be able to see that 10,000 foot up, 30,000 foot up view versus just being in the trenches, as you mentioned, being able to take a step back over a lunch or coffee or at a conference, whatever it may be. I think it's excellent advice,
Exactly.
even inspiring for me, and having more of these mentor type conversations and getting a sense where things are going. A lot of the great books recommend this towards entrepreneurial growth and finding people who've been down your road before, so they can save you a lot of steps along the way. So really glad you're able to add those two right there.
Thank you.
And just as we begin to wrap up here, Jason, I've been taking notes that I'll be sharing with my team, really getting a lot of better discussion. Any final thoughts, anything we didn't get to that you want to leave the audience with?
Maybe, I heard the adage recently, and I've tried to lean into it of get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the more I sit on it, the more it makes sense to me in terms of kind of thinking about when we've made progress. You look back at businesses, it seems to me like they move in stair steps, right? You have patterns where you're kind of using the processes that you recently built, and then you have these innovative patterns, right? I think the more you get up every morning and are dissatisfied with status quo, whatever analogy you want to use, the more you start to change processes, right? You just start to say, we're going to shuffle people up, we're going to try some different things out. Back to the kind of the test and optimize piece of it. I think if you're not getting up every week and starting the week by thinking about what can I break and try differently, then you're not trying hard enough. And I found that there's people that love change and embrace it, and there's people that find it very disconcerting. And I think as you build organizations, I've found that no matter what you do, you're going to have, if you build a great team, you're going to have people who fall into both of those camps, both of whom provide deep value. And so we started to say, even to the people who don't love change, like it's just part of who we are as a company. We're going to get up and we're going to redo everything we did last week to try to make it better. Because I feel like if you ever get to the point where you're complacent with where you are and you're using the processes that you did last month or last year, then you're not trying hard enough. And somebody's going to come along that's going to be testing or optimizing more frequently than you are. And so I think if you can just accept the fact that we're never going to get settled, we're never going to get to that, utopian phase where we've built all the processes and things are good now and we can just breathe. Like we're just going to keep breaking stuff. But once you realize that, it's a whole lot easier to have a culture that's constantly trying to get better and change. And I think it fits beautifully into what you're teaching on the podcast and kind of what you guys have leaned into. And it's made a big difference for us.
I love how it points out there's comfort in being uncomfortable as well, too, that this is part of the process. Don't wake up concerned as much as waking up looking at what you can improve. We do it on the marketing side all the time. I say good marketing requires good problem solving, but having that ability to take a deep breath in that situation and say, hey, this is part of the process. It's part of our company culture. We're always looking to do what we can to take things to the next level, even if it's uncomfortable. It's just part of the path.
Get comfortable with it, right?
Exactly. Well, Jason, want to thank you so much for being on here. Want to thank everybody for listening in as well, too. If any viewers, listeners would like to get in contact with you or Key Data, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, website's keydatadashboard.com, and you can catch me at jason@keydatadashboard.com. Always anxious to learn from anybody I can or share in reverse if it can be helpful to anybody. So feel free to reach out.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Jason, you are a wealth of information. Again, appreciate all the insights today. And for everybody tuning in, we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you so much.